I was working as a political reporter in Washington, D.C. at National Review magazine. I was in the Washington Bureau, and we got books in the mail all the time. There are people looking for media promotions and so on. Every day there were books coming in and so on. And one day came kind of randomly a history of the NCAA. And I grabbed it, cracked it open, just started flipping through it and glancing at it. And for some reason, my eyes landed on a sentence on a page that said, in 1905, 18 people died playing football. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is amazing. It's horrible. But I'd never heard this before. And can you imagine if 18 people died playing football today? This is like all we would talk about. And ultimately what I discovered is that there was not a great book on this topic, but there was a story, and it was an untold story. And it involved the creation of football as a sport. Where did it come from? How did it evolve? How did it become the game it is today? And at the center of this story, oddly, surprisingly, was President Theodore Roosevelt. Roosevelt loved football. He was a fan of it as a college student at Harvard. He went to the second ever game played between Harvard and Yale. And by the time he was president, football was massively popular, but it's got this problem with violence. And he thought that sports, and football in particular, taught lessons that, such as when you get knocked down, you need to stand back up. There's a popular legend about what he did, which is that he went to San Antonio and that he recruited the Rough Riders, wanting the kind of men that he had met when he was ranching in North Dakota in the 1880s. He wanted ranchers, he wanted cowboys, he wanted Westerners, these sort of hardened people on the frontier, this sort of thing. There's one other thing he says he's looking for among the ranchers and the cowboys and the Westerners. He says he wants football players. He wants men who played football in college, because he thought these are the kinds of guys I want to have go with me to Cuba to help win this war. There erupted a social and political movement to ban football, basically. And one of his great leaders was Charles Eliot, who was the president of Harvard. He liked sports, but he hated football for its violence, and he had other critiques, but he thought it was evil. He used that word over and over again with his critique. Football is evil. He was one of the leaders of this early progressive social and political movement to ban the sport. The progressive solution was to eliminate it. Roosevelt said, I wonder if we can do better. Is there a way we can preserve it? And so in 1905, when he was president, he summoned to the White House the three coaches from the biggest football programs in America, which at the time were Harvard, Yale, and Princeton. Up until that time in 1905, football was a game of handoffs and lateral passes. You could not throw the ball downfield. There were quarterbacks, but there were no wide receivers. Also, the scoring was completely different. Anytime you kicked the ball between the uprights, in what today we would think of as a field goal or an extra point, anytime you did that, you got 1 point. If you scored a touchdown, you got 0 points. What you got to do was kick the ball right in front of the upright. So the purpose of scoring a touchdown in that game was so you'd have an easy kick. People talked about this. Wouldn't it be cool if the quarterback could throw the ball downfield? But the football rules makers always said no. Sport's popular right now. Why would we do that? Changes the fundamental nature of the game. It was brought in as a safety measure. They thought this would open up the field. That's what they called it at the time. It would spread out the game and remove it from these massive pileups that occurred after every running play, where guys were just jumping on top of each other in dog piles and throwing elbows when, the refs couldn't see and this sort of thing. It would open up the game, spread it across the field. The deaths that they were seeing just dropped after several years once they figured out how to implement the forward pass fully. So it solved this problem of violence and brutality. At the same time, it made the sport more fun. So here's the book. It's called The Big Scrum, How Teddy Roosevelt Saved Football. I love this cover with a picture of Roosevelt and old-time football. A nifty book that blends presidential history with sports history. That's what attracted me to the topic as an author. It was a story that hadn't been told. And as a professional writer, I'm always looking for stories that haven't been told. And with this one, I think I found it, and there was enough for a book.